Hey guys, today we're going to talk about top 5 Japanese maples for fairy gardens. Fairy gardens are a fun topic. A lot of people grow them. My mom has a beautiful fairy garden in her display garden there at Maplewood Gardens, and my daughters love to go and play in the fairy garden. It's a great way to get kids interacting with it. It's a fun trend, and I get it. It's a great way to kind of make the garden feel even more magical.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fun way to sort of implement what kids love, fairies and like toys and things, and then bring that into a garden setting. And it gets them excited about gardening in general. And I think we need to do that more. I think we need to get kids into gardening, turn off the screens, get them outside, get their hands in the dirt, get them understanding about plants and how things grow. It's just a great appreciation of life.
Now, this can be in containers or in the ground. A lot of fairy gardens are in containers. They'll have small fairy figurines and things like that they can place around. Oftentimes they'll have a little house for the fairies to hide in. It's just a fun way to get that imagination going. My girls spend hours playing. I'll have to get some video of it this spring, but they spend hours playing in the fairy garden at Mom's, and they absolutely love it. It's great granddaughter time. My little guy likes it too, but he tends to just come through like a T-Rex and knock everything over. But great time spent with family. So we're going to go through our top 5 Japanese maples for fairy gardens. These are some suggestions that we think would be perfect plants to implement into your fairy garden if you want to create, kind of that ambiance that kind of has that fairy quality, that kind of ethereal, something fun, something that evokes the fairy garden aesthetic.
Now, coming here at number 5, we've got Acer palmatum Mikawa yatsubusa. This is a tightly layering dwarf Japanese maple. And what I mean by that is the spaces between the leaves are very tight. And that gives a very shingle-like appearance and a very lively appearance out there in your fairy garden.
Now, Mikawa yatsubusa is typically 4 to 5 feet tall, even in 10 years, with a very dense habit, great fiery fall color. But what really makes this one perfect for fairy gardens is that tight, layered habit to it. And it gives it almost, an interesting quality that makes it feel like something that might talk to you in the garden. We've often put sunglasses on Mikawa at garden shows, put those big clown glasses on it. It just has a little bit more Muppet-like quality to it. It has that Dr. Seuss, that something a little bit more magical feel to it. Mikawa's fun for that, especially in the early spring with that fresh foliage. Really has another characteristic that makes it seem like something you could interact with in the garden. And for that reason, it's got to be on the fairy garden list. These are tough as heck, so they can go in rock gardens. They can go in hotter areas. They're very durable in containers, so it's a perfect plant to put into your fairy garden. And it also looks like a small bonsai tree, so it kind of encapsulates that almost mythological look to it.
I remember years ago, whenever Matt and I used to do a lot of garden shows around the Southeast, we would travel down, say, to Sumter, South Carolina, to the Iris Festival, and they've got this beautiful iris gardens, and it's basically like this huge festival based around having really pretty blooms in their garden. And when we were there trying to sell Japanese maples at their festival, one of the people from their garden walked up and they said, "Have you seen our Dr. Seuss tree?" And I was thinking, Acer palmatum Dr. Seuss. We go over there, and that's just how they described Mikawa yatsubusa, is it had that Dr. Seuss-like, otherworldly-like feel in the garden. And it was cool just to see. Mikawa has this unique thing where it puts out these arms, and that tightly layering habit makes it look like it's a creature out there in the garden that's got its arms sticking up. I mean, it's an amazing tree. It's got some amazing orange and reds in the fall as well, making a dynamic contrast from the spring to the fall for your fairy garden.
Coming with that low density fits perfect in the small spaces. So here's one we had to put on a fairy garden list. At number 4, we've got fairy hair. Now, this is a Talon Buckholtz introduction with some of the thinnest, stringiest foliage of any maple. Beautiful in the spring. It's a lush green, goes to a bold red in the fall, pink red almost. So you get some really interesting colors to it. This one almost gives you conifer-like vibes. It almost feels like needles. So it has this very ethereal, open, whimsical look to it. Perfect for the fairy garden. I mean, it's really a perfect name for this plant. It's one of those plants that just has a relaxing, almost wind chime quality when you see it blowing in the wind. You feel like wind chimes. You should hear that when you see a fairy hair, just kind of, especially a nice size when they're in the landscape.
But when you see fairy hair too, you think of something mythological. You think of this plant because you don't see anything else out there in the landscape that looks quite like it. And it makes fairy hair just give that extra quality in the landscape. I mean, you think about this, it's a slow grower. It fits in that fairy garden really well. But you've got these elongated, needle-like deciduous leaves that have some great fall color in it. It really stands out from many of your other deciduous trees for your fairy garden. And it was Talon Buckholz's one of his very first introductions. He introduced a lot of amazing plants, but this is kind of one of the ones that was one of his first introductions that got him on the hook, I guess, for finding and introducing amazing plants that really stand out. And it was a chance seedling from this tree called Ascolopendrifolium. He collected the seedling from it, and 1% of the seedlings from this particular selection can look something like fairy hair. Really slow growing, and it's just unique in its characteristics. There's nothing else that's quite like fairy hair. And with a name like fairy hair, it definitely fits in your fairy garden.
Yeah, typically about 5 to 6 foot, even in 10 years. It's not a gigantic tree, and it's going to have that ethereal quality, especially you get a small one of these and it gets to that pink kind of red fall color. It's going to look amazing in a fairy garden. So kind of fits perfectly into that.
Coming to number 3, we've got Acer palmatum, Hupp's Dwarf. This is a compact Japanese maple. So it's got that tightly layering habit like we talked about earlier with Mikawa yatsubusa, but the leaves twist and curl, giving a unique texture and a different feel in the garden.
Found by Barbara Hupp, great looking plant. Kind of has some of what we like about Mikawa yatsubusa, but with different characteristics. I do find that with Hupp's Dwarf, you want to give it a little bit more shade. It doesn't want to be in a full heavy sun setting. Really beautiful, dense habit to it with a little bit more swirling leaf. So it kind of gives you a different texture and aesthetic that I think looks great in a fairy garden. Really durable, really small and compact, typically 4 to 5 foot, even in a 10-year span. So really nice compactness too. Looks great in a container. And it's another one of those trees that has a bonsai-like quality. I mean, I mentioned that multiple times, but it has that kind of ethereal look to it. It has, especially an aged Hupp's Dwarf, certainly has, a very stoic, interesting look to it.
And it definitely has some unique characteristics to it. While it has that tightly layering habit, every once in a while, like right now currently at our Buckholz farm, you can get some Seca-like growth with fasciated sports on Hupp's Dwarf itself. And that gives it just a unique quality all in itself, almost that Miss Piggy vibes. We have a full cultivar breakdown of Miss Piggy to sort of show you what we're talking about with that Seca fasciated growth on our YouTube channel. But, I mean, it is one of those next level trees, and it's just got something different about it as a dwarf compact Japanese maple that gives you a different vibe than you get with any other Japanese maple.
All right, guys, coming in here at number 2, we've got Acer palmatum Kurenai jishi, the red lion. Absolutely marvelous plant, perfect for the fairy garden. Small, compact. Red lion kind of fits that theme too. It's kind of a mythological tree. It's the red shishigashira. It's a tree that a lot of people are, really highly sought after, especially when this was first coming out. Beautiful dark reds in the early spring. The older growth fades to a light kind of a bluish green, and then you get that dark red over top of that. So it's a fun color change that continues to occur throughout the spring and summer, all in a nice, dense, compact habit. In the fall, you get the part where it's the most like shishigashira. You actually get the amazing oranges with red and yellows infused into it. So you get a really shishigashira-like fall color if you're familiar with lion's head. Kurenai jishi, though smaller in stature, fits perfect into the fairy garden.
I mean, I like it because it gives you that unique quality of the twisting leaves, gives you some red color, but not your typical maroon. I mean, it gives you a bold kind of brick red maroon kind of color. I mean, it is different in its color than many of your other Japanese maples, and its slow, dense, compact habit stands out. One of the things, too, about Kurenai jishi is it has thicker branching, and it has that stoic appearance you're talking about, and it's got just that unique, tight density to it that makes you realize that this is something different. You haven't seen a lot like Kurenai jishi. Even with our 1,500 varieties of Japanese maples here at MrMaple, Kurenai jishi stands alone. It is beautiful in its traits. Selection named by Masayoshi Yano in Japan, found by one of his friends, and it was the hit tree that everyone was after. Everyone heard about the red lion's head, and all the nurserymen in America were talking about it. It was brought over to the United States about 2008, and it's been a very hit tree because of its dense, compact habit, which makes it great for fairy gardens. But that red color and the twisting leaves gives a unique texture in any landscape, especially a fairy garden.
Again, going to work zones 5 through 9 here like the others on the list so far. This one's only going to be around 4 foot, typically in 10 years. So nice, dense, full habit to it. Perfect for the container, which works for the fairy garden, but also looks great in the ground as a small, upright, deciduous tree with great fall color.
Guys, we've made it to number 1 on our top 5 Japanese maples for fairy gardens.
Can you guess in the comment section below what number 1 is?
You know, we've already used Mikawa yatsubusa at number 5, so a lot of people normally would think that our number 1 was going to be Mikawa.
We had to go with Acer japonicum fairy lights. Perfect little small compact tree for the fairy garden. We love that habit. It's a unique one of the smallest japonicums with a really unique habit to it. I think the most fairy garden-like quality for this one is that small 3x3 habit, like a nice filled out one. Has a lace leaf quality, but then right in the early spring when it puts on those japonicum flowers, those red flowers on that small lace leaf quality plant, just looks so cool. That almost reminds me of like party lights on it. Like it has like an extra little quality to it that makes it more fairy garden than.
And while fairy lights itself is really small, the japonicum leaves are fairly large and deeply divided, extremely ornamental. And while fairy lights is really small, the leaves on Acer japonicum fairy lights are quite large, and that just gives an amazing platform for that fall color when you get yellows, oranges, and reds all at the same time, giving a quality that is very dynamic in the small fairy garden.
Yeah, lush chartreuse green in the spring. Typically 3 feet tall, 3 feet wide, even in 10 years. Going to work zones 5 through 9. That small stature makes it perfect for the container garden. You're certainly going to think, this one is next level in the fall because like he said, the reds, yellows, and oranges are really going to, bring that and elevate it to another level. But guys, you don't think about Japanese maples for flowers. Fairy lights, I absolutely love when you get a nice specimen of this, still very small. But those flowers, it just seems like a little extra adornment over that green foliage just to give it to the next level.
And fairy lights is a small, compact Acer japonicum, perhaps one of the slowest full moon Japanese maples of them all. And that smaller stature means it doesn't get big very quickly, but it also means it fits in the fairy garden really well, because what you're doing with the fairy garden is you're creating a setting. You're creating a portrait for the kids to play in or for you to enjoy with these little fairy-like castles and fairies.
The tree's the play set.
The tree's the play set, exactly.
And then you bring the figures to it. So the tree is the setting. It's the home. That's the play set that the figures live in. So you kind of think of it like that. You're creating an ambiance for the fairies to then come and enjoy. Put those toys there, especially my little girls, man. They love it. They love it. It's kind of, they will beg in the spring to go spend time at grandma's to play in the fairy garden with her. So fun way to get your grandkids into gardening. And I hope this gives you some different ideas for unique trees. There's a lot of different settings here. We kind of pick trees that are a little bit different in their aesthetic so you can create different styles into your fairy garden.
Now at MrMaple, we're known for our Japanese maples, and this was our top 5 Japanese maples for fairy gardens. But if you like this type of content on fairy gardens, let us know. We could come back later with the top 5 conifers for fairy gardens as well. We've got a lot of really cool conifers that would fit this mode.
If you love Japanese maples, make sure to subscribe here on the MrMaple Show. We appreciate you watching.
Take care.
God bless.
And have a great day.